Hi, welcome to this video on chronic illness and mental health. I'm Tracy. I am the Chief Exec of Open Minds Mental Health, an organisation that supports people in training around mental illness. I'm going to get on and show you some slides and explain more about what you're going to get from this short video. So here is my organisation, Open Minds Mental Health, and you'll see our email address and in fact our website address there that you can access if you want to find out a bit more about what we do. And also you'll see that there's a Wiltshire Council logo here because we are extremely grateful to Wiltshire Council for supporting the creation of these films. These are accessible free to anybody that have been created to support people, particularly in Wiltshire, but we hope that you enjoy them wherever you are. These films have been created to work alongside some lived experience films that we've made. Apologies for this terrible screenshot of me with the wonderful and beautiful Jodi, who created a film with us. So you can look at this without having looked at those. You don't need to have seen those. But if you go to our website and /videos, you can see those. So a lot of what I talk to you about will be prompted by the incredible lived experience that Jodi has shared on this film. So by all means, look at that either before you watch this or afterwards, or not at all. It won't impact in your learning from this. But yeah, do explore those if you would like to. So what we're going to talk about is very much based on the learning that we share with our main training. So we train a lot of the Mental Health First Aid England packages, and so a lot of the support and the suggestions that we're going to share with you in this are based on Mental Health First Aid England's courses, and we'll talk a little bit about those towards the end of this. But let's start with the impact of chronic illness. And again, a lot of this Jodi beautifully and eloquently shared in the lived experience film. And one of the things we know around physical illness in general is the impact that delayed diagnosis can have, particularly with invisible illnesses, mental or physical. It can be really difficult to get the support and the diagnosis that we might need in order to be able to make a plan and understand a bit about what's going on for us and what we might be able to do to alleviate symptoms or live most positively with them if that's what we need to do with our chronic illness. So diagnosis seems to be really important. Of course, there's often ongoing pain for people who are experiencing chronic illness, and that's incredibly challenging to manage and stay positive and sustain a positive mental health if you are dealing with ongoing pain, fatigue. And again, fatigue can be really difficult because it can be misunderstood and looked at as people being lazy or not having the motivation, or if they just got up and did more, then they would feel more energized. And I think, you know, fatigue is a real and genuine symptom for a lot of people who are experiencing chronic illness. All of those things add to this sense of uncertainty. And we know that people are often at their best when they are able to be in control of their lives and be in control of the plans that they make. And when you're experiencing chronic illness, of course, it can be really difficult to make plans to go out and see people and plan anything social or professional. Because you don't know how that chronic illness might impact or whether you're going to be having a good day or a bad day. And again, that can really lead to people feeling isolated because you don't want to make plans in fear that you're going to have to cancel them and upset people, so you just don't make them. And then people's lives can become smaller and smaller because of the limitations that their chronic illness might cause them. Not being believed. Again, with any physical illness, it can be really difficult for people to feel understood, both with medical professionals as well as friends and family. And that can lead people to feeling shameful, feel weak, feel like people think that they're flaky. And actually, with a lot of people for a long time with chronic illnesses, there can be periods of denial, or indeed, actually, even after a diagnosis, not necessarily feeling able to accept the truth of a diagnosis. And that can take some time to accept for the person experiencing it, as well as those around them. Although actually, sometimes people around people maybe do see people's struggles more than the person that's experiencing them. But yeah, often that understanding and getting through that period of denial and accepting what's going on can be a real breakthrough. And I guess, you know, similarly, that feeling misunderstood, you know, feeling that people around you just don't get it and say things that they think might be helpful, but actually really a bit undermining, like, you know, for people with chronic fatigue, you know, if you got out and exercise more, maybe that would build up your energy, or well, maybe if you organized your sleep better, or, you know, things that actually can make people feel really quite frustrated inside because they know that it's not as simple, or indeed they've tried many things that people suggest might help, but actually they haven't. I mean, and those of you who are watching this who do experience chronic illness, and you know, this is by no means an exhaustive list. I'm sure there are many things that you experience that aren't here. But this is just an indication, I hope, of the breadth of some of the challenges that people who experience chronic illness might face. And of course, then, you know, it's not at all unlikely or surprising that people who experience chronic illness also then experience mental health challenges too. And it might be that the mental health challenges predate a diagnosis of a chronic illness. For some of those reasons you've just talked about, that there are long periods of time where people are in denial or are not understood or do not or haven't received a diagnosis, all of which can lead people to really struggle to manage their day-to-day lives. And that can lead to, and often does, I think, lead to conditions like anxiety disorders. And I've listed here some of the ones that Jodi specifically highlights in her shared experience. So being generally anxious, so overthinking, catastrophizing, worrying about things on a day-to-day basis can often go alongside having a physical illness, not least because often your life is diminished. You're not as busy. You've got a lot more time to be ruminating, to be inside your own head, and things just become more challenging and just harder to deal with because life has become that much more difficult. Obsessive compulsive disorder, and that can manifest itself in many different ways for people in terms of not only what we might understand about repeated behaviours, you know, walking up and down the stairs 5 times and checking the light switch, or even the intrusive thoughts that sometimes people experience with obsessive compulsive disorder. But there are things like picking hair. So I'm going to struggle to pronounce this, trichotillomania that Jodi talks about, where people obsessively pick hair from their head, from their face, pick scabs, bite nails. Those sorts of things can be manifestations of obsessive compulsive disorder type behaviour that can go alongside diagnoses like chronic illnesses. Social anxiety, again, for some of the reasons we talked about before, that struggling to commit to doing things with other people. So you do less, and the less that you do, the bigger deal it is when you do it. So that feeling of, do you know what, I can't even say yes to doing something with people because I'm going to start to feel anxious about it and worry about it and think, or should I get out of it from the minute that I've said I will? So actually, some people decide that actually it's easier to just say no and not accept invitations to do things socially. But then you get out of practice, and then when you are in social situations, things are much more difficult to manage and do trigger anxiety responses. So it can really start to limit people's lives and ability to engage in joyful things that that they might once have really enjoyed. And then, you know, that could get to the point of agoraphobia, where, you know, really leaving the house becomes incredibly difficult for people. And again, you know, this is not a exhaustive list. There may be other areas of phobias, of possible post-traumatic stress disorder, different ways people might experience anxiety alongside a chronic illness. And then, of course, along with all of that is depression. I mean, again, it wouldn't be surprising, would it, if people are dealing with the challenges that a chronic illness presents, very possibly an anxiety disorder alongside it, that it might be that depression then starts to manifest itself. And of course, that can then develop into hopelessness and a feeling like life is really, really difficult to live. And as I have added to this slide, that, you know, there is a risk of suicide for people who are experiencing depression, chronic illness, anxiety. A combination of those things can make people really vulnerable to suicide. So these are all things that are useful for us to be mindful of and aware of. And these might be some signs that we can pick up. So I'm going to just quickly run through these. I mean, you can read these, and please skip to the next slide if that feels more useful for you. But, you know, people withdrawing is often a sign that people are struggling. Whatever it is, chronic illness, anxiety, depression, or none of those things, if someone withdraws, it's often because something is going on that they're struggling with. So that can be a sign for us. People taking time off work or being late for things, when it's out of character, when it starts to become something that happens that may not naturally be the way that they've behaved in the past. Hair pulling, we talked a little bit about. Tics, so it might be biting nails, it might be sort of tapping feet, or just sort of seeming not relaxed, might demonstrate that they're experiencing anxiety. Extreme emotions, you know, people who might get very angry, might get very tearful, might present as really quite worried. So extremes of emotions can sometimes be a sign. People being snappy or seeming angry, again, when it's out of character for them. Procrastination, so really struggling to make decisions, needing to defer to other people. Maybe you're struggling. I've got avoidance there, a couple of points down, you know, avoiding emails, maybe even avoiding social media, WhatsApp groups, meetings, joining meetings without cameras on. Going back to language, if people are using words like, oh, this is hopeless, I feel useless, I can see no hope, no future in this. Picking up on that sort of language also could be a sign that someone is struggling. Not enjoying things they used to enjoy. So if someone had a real passion at going to the choir or going to the gym or reading or whatever, playing with their pet, whatever it is that's brought people joy in the past, if they're not doing those things or not engaging in those joyful things as they once did, that again can be a sign that people are struggling. Tiredness. And that doesn't necessarily mean a lack of sleep or trouble sleeping, although sometimes it does. It can just mean that people are exhausted. And that may be the result of a chronic illness, but actually it can also be something that people experience who are experiencing anxiety or depression. So with depression, you know, people can have 12, 14 hours sleep a night and still be utterly exhausted. So that can be a real sign. Change in weight, so either losing a lot of weight or gaining weight, can be a sign that people are using food to cope or avoidance of food to cope. and not looking after their appearance. So people can often seem quite unkempt. If someone's experiencing depression, getting out of bed in the morning can seem like climbing Mount Everest, let alone getting in the shower, keeping your clothes clean. So again, that can be a sign. And I've put here at the bottom that actually, I mean, and again, like all the other lists, these are not all of the signs that there might be, but these are quite key, more typical indications that someone might be struggling. But it's really important to say that people who experience chronic illness, mental health conditions, can be incredibly skilled at masking what's going on for them. And that takes an awful lot of energy for them to do that. So it actually can exacerbate things to a large degree. So it's important to say that we may not always pick up on the signs, but part of our training is that we believe that the more of you who know the sorts of signs to look out for and have the confidence to know how to deal with that, so what you might do when you start to see those signs, the more likely we are to be able to engage with someone who might be struggling. So just some examples here of the sorts of things that you might be seeing in other people around you that you're worried about, or in fact, you might even recognise in yourselves. So we spent a fair bit of time there looking at what the challenges are, but there are things that can help. And so let's have a little look at those. So I've put here about a diagnosis. So we talked about that right at the beginning, that lots of people actually can be quite nervous about receiving a diagnosis and might avoid seeking one. But what we understand is that often getting a diagnosis can be the beginning of a recovery. And that may not be, for some people, finding a way of getting entirely back to normal and being symptom-free. That's not always possible for people who are experiencing chronic illness. And in some cases, although mostly not, but with mental illness too, sometimes that can be the case. But what recovery can mean is that you find the very best ways to live as full a life as you possibly can. Again, please do have a listen to Jodi's film if you get a chance, because I think she demonstrates amazingly how she is really making a difference in her world, as limited as it has become due to her chronic illness. So diagnosis can be a really important step for people living the very best way that they can within the confines of whatever diagnosis they might receive. So thus talking to a GP can be really important. And again, lots of people are quite reticent to. And one of the things we can do as people who are supporting people is ask why. What's making you feel like you don't want to speak to the GP? Because it may be that depending on their responses, we can help them get through those and help them find a way of seeking that professional medical input. Because we should not be making diagnoses for people. We should not be trying to fix things. What we want to do is to try to encourage people to get the supports that might really make a difference for them. So we know that GP surgeries are incredibly under pressure, but it's massively important that people understand that whether it's a chronic illness, a physical illness, or a mental health condition, that they absolutely warrant and deserve support from a GP. Sometimes it's worth asking for a GP who specialises in a particular area that it might be that you want to talk to them about, to make sure they get the best care possible. If you're not sure what the response ought to be, I can really recommend looking at the NICE guidelines, so the National Institute for Care Excellence, NICE. For whatever it is, physical or mental health, it can be really useful for you as an advocate or for you as a potential patient to understand what the response ought to be for that particular condition. So you can say to a doctor, actually, I really feel like the response that I've had isn't in line with what the guidelines are, and actually, could you please reconsider based on whatever it is you've read through the NICE guidelines. So you can do that for yourselves as well as for people that you're advocating for. And then we've got some other professional treatments here. So that might be talking therapy, so counselling, psychotherapy, cognitive behaviour therapy, which is another form of talking therapy, which is very much about trying to help rewrite the way that we think and behave to better cope with situations that we're dealing with. And then medication. And I think there's still a lot of stigma around the use of medication for some physical illnesses, but particularly for mental health conditions, whether it be anxiety or depression. And for some people, medication can make all the difference. And it may be that people just need it for a short period of time while they build up the resources, the tools, the networks, the support that they need in order that their lives can be thus that they are able to cope better with what's been going on for them, and may not need the medication ongoing. But for some people, it's absolutely what they need to get them to a point to be able to engage with things that might make a difference for them. So please don't worry about using medication or encouraging others to try medication. This can also be a little bit of a journey in itself, because sometimes people really do need to try a number of medications before they find the one that suits them, or tweak dosages. So please stay in touch with a doctor. Don't worry about going back if you need to really get things right. It can be quite tricky for people to sustain hope when they've done the hugely brave thing of going to the doctor and accepting medication, and then after 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, it's not feeling any better. Please encourage people to be as tenacious as possible in going back and seeing if they can try something else that might work better for them. And actually the same for talking therapy. That's the dynamics between someone and their therapist is really important. So if somebody has tried therapy, but they've said, it didn't work for me, it may just be that the dynamics of that particular therapist wasn't right for them. So where it's possible to try to find other therapists, please do. There are a lot online that you can search out, and just make sure that if you're looking for private therapists, that they are part of recognised bona fide organisations. So please do some Googling around that and making sure that they are properly certified as therapists. And other things that can help. So emotional support, understanding, accepting, just really not judging, not questioning, really accepting that person for where they are and that their experience is what it is, and just not trying to give them glib advice. Just be supportive listeners. Listening is such a powerful thing. So ask questions. Try to help that person find their way through. So rather than say to somebody, do you know what, I think it would really make a difference if you got out every day and went for a 15-minute walk, which can sound like it's helpful, but actually it might be received like, oh my God, that's really not what's going to make a difference for me. And actually it can leave people feeling more hopeless. Whereas if our approach is there anything you think might make a difference? Is there anything you think that if you added it to your day, it might just help things feel a little bit more manageable? And so by asking questions, you might help that person identify things that might help them. People are experts in their own lives. People do know, but sometimes they just need to be heard. They just need to be listened to and encouraged to find where their best ways forward are. Sometimes practical help can make a really big difference. If people aren't able to cook for themselves very well, and nutrients is a massively important thing for our physical and our mental health. Cleaning, sometimes people become overwhelmed if their houses are not clean and tidy, so maybe to support in that way. Doing the gardening, whatever practical help might make a difference. If people are feeling really isolated and fatigued, maybe going out for a drive, but organising things in as flexible a way as you possibly can. How do you feel about, if you fancy going out for a drive, I'm around tomorrow, no pressure, you can just message me in the morning. If you fancy it, let me know. Because actually just getting out, knowing that there are people there that will support you and not judge you and not be upset if plans change last minute can make such a difference. And I've also added here about making appointments. If someone struggles with the idea of making a GP appointment, and I don't know about you, but certainly in my experience at the moment, you can be on the phone for 40 minutes before you get to speak to a receptionist and make an appointment. Offer to do that for somebody if that feels like that might be a way of helping them access those supports. So again, an example of the sorts of things that might help someone that you as a supporter of, or someone who might be experiencing chronic illness or mental illness might be able to use. One of the things that Jodi talks about in the film is her experience of work. And work can be such an important part of someone feeling fulfilled. And it might be that people go through a period of time where they can't access work, where they're not well enough. But as someone becomes more well and they want to access work, it's really important that we help them the best we can to access that. And it might be that it starts off with some voluntary work. I'm a huge advocate of the power of voluntary work. I think it provides such a lot of sense of well-being and purpose and routine and being part of a team, and you're doing something that's making a difference. That can make such a difference to people's feelings of well-being. So please, that might be a first step towards people working. If you are in work, or people are in work and are experiencing chronic illness or mental illness, there are very different cultures in workplaces. And one of the privileges I get is training people from different organisations. And I'm often working with organisations who are really trying to hold a culture that is welcoming and supportive and helps people to thrive. And I can see the difference it makes to them as organisations and how much they thrive. Both as a culture and as in terms of morale, but also economically, that it makes entire economic sense for companies to support their staff in order that they retain them, that they work to their best ability, and are really positive about the organisation that they work for. And in order to do that, it's important that organisations get it, that they understand that people have struggles, and that struggles that people have in their personal lives or with their physical or mental health are going to impact their working life. Most likely, it's incredibly unusual that people can compartmentalize so effectively that what happens at home doesn't impact on work and vice versa. So being an organisation that gets it, and that can manifest itself through just being explicit about it. Think about if you're here watching this and you run an organisation or you're part of an HR team, think about your recruitment process. If you have in your recruitment process right at the beginning that you actively encourage people with lived experience of mental illness to apply, that says a massive amount about you as an organisation. Sharing stories. I'm a passionate storyteller, which is why I've wanted to do these lived experience films, because actually I think we learn an awful lot more from different people's stories than we do from people like me and PowerPoints. So if in your organisation, your chief execs or people at different parts of your business feel able to share on a newsletter or however you communicate that they've had lived experience of mental illness or have supported people who have, that sends a really strong message to a team that they're in a place that gets it. Training, I think there's something like, I can't remember the data, something like 26% of managers feel like they've had sufficient training around supporting the well-being of teams. So of course I'm going to say this, but I truly believe it, that the mental health first aid training and the mental health aware training and those other trainings that Mental Health First Aid England offer are hugely impactful for organisations. There's a lot of training out there, and I'm sure there are some really good ones, but I think there is also an awful lot that are box ticking exercises. And I think the thing about the Mental Health First Aid England training is that it's very interactive, it's live, it really gives people an opportunity to think about their experiences, to practice how they might support different people, and is often a catalyst for thinking about the policies and procedures and how an organisation functions. So really would encourage consideration of training. And again, remember, I know it's an investment of time and money, and that can be really tricky for organisations, but actually it really will come back tenfold in terms of the economic impact that can have for an organisation. Employee assistance programs, if you've not come across those, it's worth having a look at those. EAPs, they're basically sort of like they're companies that staff and family members of staff can access counselling support, financial support, legal support, much more affordable than you might imagine. Really worth having a look at what might be available to your business, even if you're a small business. I've been on the board of a number of organisations, and I looked into it for one small organisation I was a trustee of, and it was something like £6 per person per month or something. But the more people you have, the less it costs. So yeah, I mean, definitely have an explore, because that can be a real bonus. Again, you're sending a message that you care because you've invested in that for your staff. But also it's a confidential, quick to access support for staff, where we know that getting NHS access to talking therapists can be really tricky. This is often a really timely way that people can access some support, even if it's just sort of a holding place while they get more professional support through the NHS or whatever. And then I've just put this last one here about encouraging whole self. Really encourage people to be their whole selves when they come to work. If people feel that they are able to be honest about who they are and what they experience, then that is going to make a real difference to people's ability to thrive in the workplace. So what next? If you thought this is useful, please share it. Share it with colleagues or friends or families. Use it as a talking point, maybe if it's in a team meeting or a lunchtime awareness session or something. Please feel free to use this if you think it's useful. Please do get in touch with me if you would like to think about training, or maybe doing a talk with you. If you're interested in considering coaching for any of your teams, again, let me know. Or maybe you want to reconsider your policies and procedures. This has been a really bit of a whistle stop tour of key thinking around how we can support each other and ourselves. And I would really encourage you to think about maybe joining a course that can give you far more tools and far more information than I've been able to in this short film. I have just added a few signposts here that specifically might help with some of the things that we've talked about. Hub of Hope is a really useful site if you've not come across it. Within Hub of Hope, you can find signposts. So really, you don't need anything else to have Hub of Hope. It's free to access. You can basically put in the thing that you're wanting information about for yourself or other people, so bereavement, eating disorders, chronic illness, whatever. You can look at local or international, and it will give you the organisations that are out there to support that particular thing. So that could just be a really useful thing to have on your phone or on your computer to be able to look at where you might be able to go for support. And of course, if any of this feels triggering or upsetting, or you feel in any way upset having listened to some of the things that we've talked about, please do not forget these crisis supports. So Samaritans are amazingly supportive of people who are in crisis. Shout is a 24-hour text service if you've not come across it. So you can text 85258 any time of the day or night if you want some support. And then I've just got Mind there as well, which is a great national organisation that has local branches that might be useful to you. So that's it. That's really all I wanted to say around chronic illness. Please do have a look at the film if you want to. Have a look at our website. We've got a number of these films that we're going to gradually add. If you've got any thoughts about things that you'd like me to explore, I'd really happily do that. There's a reminder of our website. But very, very, very importantly, look after yourself. Particularly if you are in a supporting role of other people, it's so important that you look after yourself. So prioritize your self-care, because if you're exhausted and at the end of your tether, you are not going to be able to be the supporter of others that you want to be. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I'm going to stop that share and say please do take care of yourselves, and hopefully I'll meet you in person or you'll visit some of our other films. Thank you.